A sailor wakes before dawn and realizes the stars are gone. The compass spins in useless circles. The shoreline has disappeared. The map on the table no longer matches the water beneath the hull. For one terrible hour, he believes he is lost. Then, the fog thins just enough for him to see a line drawn on the back of the map. A rowdy had never noticed because he had only trusted the front. The storm did not remove his direction. It removed the map that was too small. You call this season confusion because the old coordinates stopped working. But what if the disorientation is not proof that you have no path, but proof that the field has begun rerouting you toward one your former self could not read? There is a belief so deeply embedded in the human nervous system that most people never think to question it. The belief is this: when you know where you are going, you are safe. And when you do not know where you are going, something has gone wrong. This belief is not a truth. It is a map. And like all maps, it was drawn at a particular moment in time for a particular version of the territory. The moment the territory shifts, the map becomes a liability rather than a guide. You were taught that confusion signals failure. You were taught that uncertainty signals abandonment. You were taught that if you had done the right things, made the right choices, and aligned yourself correctly with your purpose, the path would always be visible, always well lit, always moving forward in a direction you could name. But no one told you that there are seasons in a life when the path goes underground. No one told you that certain corridors of becoming are only navigable in the dark. No one explained that the field sometimes withdraws the familiar precisely because the familiar has become a ceiling rather than a floor. The belief that confusion means failure is the belief of someone who has never distinguished between two entirely different kinds of not knowing. There is the not knowing that comes from having made a catastrophic error, and there is the not knowing that comes from having outgrown the coordinates you were using. These two experiences feel nearly identical from the inside. The stomach tightens, the mind races, the questions multiply without producing answers. The silence grows heavier than it should. To the nervous system, they are the same emergency, but to the field, they are opposites. One is a collapse. The other is a calibration. When a system recalibrates, it must first release its current operating position. It must become, for a moment, unmoored. The instruments go quiet. The readouts flatline. This is not system failure. This is the pause between one frequency and another, the breath taken before a new signal can be received. The false belief tells you to panic during this pause. The false belief tells you to do something immediately, to seize the nearest coordinate and force it into your trajectory, to restore the appearance of direction at any cost. And so, most people do. They reach for the expired map and trace its roads again, faster and harder this time, as if effort could make an outdated route correct. What they are doing is filling the space of rerouting with noise. They are transmitting on the old frequency so loudly that they cannot receive the new one. They are so committed to not being lost that they become genuinely, structurally unable to be found. The truth that this codex was written to restore is this: disorientation is not the opposite of direction. In the language of the field, disorientation is often the method of direction. It is the mechanism by which a consciousness too attached to its former map is gently, and sometimes forcibly, separated from coordinates that would have led it somewhere smaller than it was meant to go. What you call confusion, the field calls transition. What you call being lost, the archive calls being rerouted. The difference is not semantic. The difference is everything. Because when you believe you are lost, you fight to return to the last known position. But when you understand you are being rerouted, you become still enough to receive the new coordinates before you move. This is what you will find inside this codex. You will find the law beneath rerouting, the hidden mechanism that the field uses to redirect a life when the map it has been following has expired. You will understand why this process feels like abandonment when it is actually architecture. You will learn to recognize the difference between a path that has ended and a path that has gone underground, waiting for you to find its new entrance. You will be shown how the rerouting signal appears in your actual life, not in theory, not in abstract language, but in the texture of your days, in the conversations that find you unexpectedly, in the goals that have gone strangely quiet, in the doors that close without explanation, and in the new symbols that keep appearing at the edges of your attention. You will receive the diagnostic mirror. The pattern of rerouting has a specific shape, and once you can recognize that shape, you will never again confuse it with failure. You will know from the inside whether you are being collapsed or calibrated. You will know whether the silence around you is absence or invitation. You will also be given the tools of discernment, because not every confusion is rerouting. Not every paralysis is spiritual guidance. There are false signals and distortions that can masquerade as the field's correction, and this codex will teach you to separate them from the genuine article. Clarity is only useful if it is accurate. Then you will receive the protocol. The hidden map. Protocol is a sequence of practices designed to help you navigate a rerouting season with precision rather than panic. It will not ask you to surrender all movement. It will not ask you to become passive in the name of trust. It will ask you to move differently, to read the field more carefully, and to follow a different set of coordinates than the ones your former map provided. The protocol exists because spiritual wisdom without practical application becomes another way of avoiding the work. The field does not reward inaction dressed as surrender. It rewards attentive, calibrated, signal-responsive movement. You will learn the difference. This codex will close by returning you to the sailor and the hidden map. By the time you arrive at that closing, the metaphor will have changed its meaning. What seemed like a story about being lost will reveal itself as a story about learning to read the side of the map that had always been there, waiting for you to turn the page over. You are not here by accident. Documents like this one do not find people who have nothing to learn from them. If this codex found you during a season of confusion, during a season when the old coordinates have stopped producing results and the new ones have not yet declared themselves, then this is precisely the archive you were meant to open. The field speaks. It has always spoken. The question has never been whether the transmission exists. The question is whether you have learned the language it uses when it is redirecting a life toward something the old map could not have reached. If this language feels familiar, if something in you recognizes what is being said here, not as new information, but as remembered truth, subscribe to the Third Library. There are more codices waiting to be opened, and each one was placed in this archive for the same reason this one was, because the map you were given was never the only map. There is a law that governs the movement of a life, and it is older than any doctrine, older than any system of belief, older than the names that have been given to invisible forces across every civilization that has ever tried to describe them. This law does not have a single name inside this archive, but for the purposes of this codex, it will be called the Law of Field Rerouting. The law states this: When the identity, frequency, and trajectory of a consciousness shift beyond a certain threshold, the map that consciousness has been using to navigate reality becomes structurally incompatible with the new position. The map does not simply become less accurate, it becomes a distortion. It begins to lead the person away from their actual path rather than toward it. When this threshold is crossed, the field does not send a polite memo. It does not announce the transition with ceremony. It enacts the rerouting through the dissolution of familiar structures. The job that once felt purposeful becomes hollow. The relationship that once felt essential becomes a place of chronic friction. The creative work that once flowed with ease becomes dry and mechanical. The city, the community, the identity, the plan, all of it begins to lose its texture. This is not punishment. This is not abandonment. This is the field withdrawing energy from the pathways that have reached their limit in order to redirect that energy toward a new architecture. The withdrawal feels like loss because human consciousness is trained to interpret the departure of the familiar as subtraction. But subtraction and redirection are not the same operation. Think of a river that has been flowing through a particular channel for many seasons. The channel deepens and the river moves swiftly. This is the season of forward motion, and it is recognizable, measurable, and satisfying. Then the water table shifts. The underground geography changes, and the river, following the path of least resistance, begins to change course. For a time, the old channel still holds some water. For a time, both the old path and the new direction seem to exist simultaneously. But eventually, the old channel becomes shallow. The current that once moved through it slows to a trickle. From the perspective of someone who only ever knew the river in its old channel, this looks like the river dying. It is not dying. It is relocating. The law of field rerouting operates through 3 distinct phases, and each phase has its own texture, its own signals, and its own demands. The first phase is the withdrawal. In this phase, energy and confirmation are removed from the existing path. The former sense of rightness disappears. The momentum that once seemed to carry the person forward without effort becomes something they must manufacture consciously. And even then, it feels mechanical. This is the phase most people experience as depression, failure, or divine silence. The second phase is the suspension. In this phase, the old path has gone quiet, but the new path has not yet declared itself. This is the phase that the field requires for recalibration, and it is the phase that the human nervous system tolerates least well. The suspension is the open water between maps. There is no shoreline in either direction. There is only the field, vast and apparently featureless, and the consciousness at its center, waiting for a signal it does not yet know how to read. The third phase is the emergence. In this phase, new signals begin to appear. They are subtle at first. They arrive in conversation, in unexpected encounters, in recurring symbols, in books open to a particular page, in doors that open easily where all other doors had resisted. The emergence does not announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, the way dawn arrives, not as a single sudden light, but as a slow, unmistakable brightening at the edge of a sky that was dark for a long time. The law of field rerouting is not rare. It is not reserved for those with particular spiritual gifts or elevated awareness. It operates in every life without exception. The only variable is whether the person navigating it understands what is happening and that understanding changes everything about how they move through it. A person who does not know the law interprets phase 1 as catastrophe. They respond to the withdrawal of energy by pouring more effort into the depleted path. They double their hours, increase their activity, make louder commitments to a direction that the field has already begun to redirect. They are, in the language of navigation, rowing harder on a current that has reversed its direction. A person who understands the law interprets phase 1 as information. They feel the withdrawal and they ask a different question. Instead of asking what they are doing wrong, they ask what the field is trying to separate them from. The distinction between these two questions produces entirely different outcomes. In phase 2, the suspension, a person without knowledge of the law experiences what might be called identity crisis. They lose the definition of themselves that was embedded in the old path. Without the job, the relationship, the plan, the role, or the forward motion, they do not know who they are. And since identity without a defining structure feels like dissolution, they rush to fill the void with the nearest available form. They take whatever opportunity presents itself, not because it is right, but because the suspension has become unbearable. A person who knows the law holds the suspension with a different quality of attention. They do not fill it with noise. They do not perform productivity in the empty space. They become literate in the silence. They learn that the suspension is not the absence of the field's attention. It is the field's attention at its most concentrated. The suspension is the archive of new coordinates being written. In phase 3, the emergence, a person without knowledge of the law often dismisses the new signals because they are so different from what they expected the path forward to look like. The new signals do not resemble the old map. They come from unfamiliar directions. They require a different kind of engagement, and so the person who has been trained to recognize only the old form of confirmation misses the new form entirely. But the person who has learned to read the field in its rerouting language sees phase 3 for what it is. They notice the pattern. They follow the low-friction openings. They test the new coordinates with small movements rather than grand commitments. And because they are not requiring the new path to look like the old one, they can see it for what it is. There is something important to understand about the timing of rerouting. The field does not reroute on a schedule that the conscious mind can predict or control. It reroutes in response to internal shifts that occur at the level of identity, belief, and vibrational frequency. These shifts are often invisible to the person experiencing them in the moment. A belief held for 20 years may dissolve quietly over a season of ordinary life. An identity assumption rooted in childhood may begin to loosen without any dramatic event to mark the occasion. And then, without apparent cause, the map stops matching the territory. This is why rerouting so often appears to come from outside the self. A sudden job loss, an unexpected ending, a creative block that will not yield to effort, a relationship that reaches its natural limit. These events seem to arrive from external forces. But in almost every case, the external event is the field's response to an internal shift that had already occurred. The rerouting was not imposed from the outside. It was generated from within and then reflected through the architecture of experience. This understanding is not an invitation to blame yourself for every difficulty. It is an invitation to look inward first, to ask what has already changed in you before asking why everything around you seems to be changing. The outer rerouting is the echo of the inner one. The field also reroutes in response to what might be called identity sealing events. These are moments when a person has reached the outer edge of what their current identity structure can produce. They have extracted everything available from their current frequency, not because they are lacking, but because they have completed that particular level of their becoming. The rerouting that follows this completion is not a correction of error. It is a promotion. It does not feel like a promotion. It feels like a loss. It feels like the world has withdrawn its approval, its momentum, and its confirmation. But what it is doing is withdrawing them from the former floor so that they can be re-established on the new one. The law of field rerouting is in operation right now, not as an abstraction, in your actual life. The signal that brought you to this codex is itself a transmission. The fact that you are here, listening, seeking a language for something you have been experiencing without a name, is part of the pattern. You did not arrive here because you are failing. You arrived here because the field is writing new coordinates, and part of what it is writing includes the understanding you are receiving in this moment. The hidden map was never lost. It was waiting for you to stop looking only at the front. The reason most people misread rerouting is not stupidity, not spiritual immaturity, and not a failure of faith. The reason is more fundamental than any of those explanations. It is this: the human nervous system was built for a world in which uncertainty meant danger. In the ancient architecture of survival, the unknown was not a philosophical question. It was a territory where threats were invisible and therefore more lethal than visible ones. This wiring is still present. It runs beneath every thought, every emotional response, every instinct to restore the familiar. When the map fails, when the coordinates become unreliable, when the structure that was providing a sense of direction disappears, the nervous system does not file this event under spiritual transition. It files it under threat. And the response to threat is not contemplation. It is action. Fill the space, restore the structure, return to the known. Do something, anything, to re-establish the feeling of being oriented, even if the orientation is false. This is why people cling to expired paths with ferocious energy at precisely the moment when the field is trying to redirect them. They are not being stubborn or self-destructive. They are following the oldest protocol in human biology. When the ground disappears, find ground, fast, and hold it. The problem's that this protocol was written for a world of physical threats. It was not written for a world in which the ground sometimes disappears precisely so that you can be relocated to higher ground. The ancient survival instinct does not have a category for benevolent dissolution. It has no subroutine for sacred rerouting. It only knows known equals safe, unknown equals danger. This is the first reason people misread rerouting. They experience it through a filter designed for an entirely different category of event. The second reason is the social architecture of certainty. The world does not reward people for saying, "I do not know where I am going." It rewards people for having a plan, for communicating direction with conviction, for projecting confidence in their trajectory. The person who says, "I am in a season of suspension and I am waiting for new coordinates," is often met with advice rather than recognition. Fill the gap. Make a decision. Pick something. Stay busy. Have you tried harder? And so people do. They translate the pressure of the social architecture of certainty into internal pressure to perform direction, even when no authentic direction is available. They choose a coordinate not because the field confirmed it, but because the silence became socially unacceptable. They mistake the relief of ending the suspension for the rightness of the choice, And they discover, sometimes months or years later, that they forced themselves back onto an old frequency to escape the discomfort of genuine transition. The third reason is the loss of identity. When a person's map expires, it is rarely just the map that goes. The map was also a self-definition. It told them who they were by telling them where they were going. The career was not just a job, it was an identity. The relationship was not just a connection, it was a definition. The plan was not just a strategy, it was a story about who this person was in the world. When the map goes, the identity story goes with it, and the silence left behind is not experienced as empty space, it is experienced as the absence of the self. This is why a rerouting season so often feels like dissolution rather than transition. Because in a very real sense, an older version of the self is being dissolved. The disorientation is not just about direction, it is about identity. People misread rerouting because they believe the dissolution of a former self is the end of the self entirely. They do not yet know that what the field is dissolving was always a temporary structure. It was scaffolding, not the building. But from the inside of the dissolving, it is very difficult to see the difference between scaffolding being removed and a building being demolished. The fourth reason is the absence of a language for this experience. Most people have been given very limited vocabulary for navigating the space between maps. They have been given the language of success and failure, forward and backward, right and wrong. They have not been given the language of rerouting, of suspension, of signal, of calibration, of field correction. Without a language, the experience cannot be accurately interpreted. And an experience that cannot be interpreted will always be interpreted through the nearest available framework. For most people, the nearest available framework for prolonged disorientation is either failure or punishment. Either I've made irreparable mistakes that have led me here, or something has decided to withhold from me what others have been given. Both of these frameworks are inaccurate. Both of them produce the same result. A person who is in the middle of a sacred rerouting season, spending their energy on self-accusation or resentment rather than on learning to read the new signal. There is also the matter of impatience. Rerouting does not operate on a timeline that the conscious mind can negotiate. The suspension phase, in particular, does not respond to pressure. It does not compress because the person is uncomfortable. It does not accelerate because the person has decided they have waited long enough. The field writes new coordinates at its own pace, according to processes that are not visible to the personality that is being redirected. This is profoundly difficult for people who have learned to produce results through effort. Effort is the primary tool in most people's repertoire, and effort works beautifully when the direction is accurate and the coordinates are live. But effort applied during a suspension phase does not accelerate the rerouting. It generates noise. It exhausts the very energy that will be needed to follow the new path when it emerges. People misread rerouting because they believe they should be able to think their way through it, plan their way through it, effort their way through it. And when none of those approaches produce clarity, they interpret the failure of the approach as confirmation that something is fundamentally wrong. Nothing is fundamentally wrong. The approach is simply the wrong tool for this particular phase of the work. Finally, people misread rerouting because the new signal, when it does begin to emerge, does not look like what they expected direction to look like. It arrives quietly. It comes wrapped in something ordinary. It does not announce itself with the authority of the old coordinates. It whispers at the edge of attention, and because it is so different from the bold, clear direction they are hoping for, they dismiss it as wishful thinking or coincidence. They are waiting for the map they knew. The field is offering them a map they have never seen, and the gap between what they are looking for and what is actually being offered is where most rerouting is missed. Consider the person who has built a career with patience and devotion over many years. They have earned the position, the title, the recognition. And then something happens. Not a dramatic failure, not a public collapse, something quieter and more disorienting. The work simply stops feeling like theirs. They sit in meetings that once energized them and feel a distance they cannot explain. They complete projects they once found meaningful and feel nothing on the other side of completion. The competence is still there. The results are still being produced. But the aliveness inside the work is gone. This person does not know what to call what is happening. They are not burned out in the clinical sense. They are not depressed. They are functional, capable, and by every external measure, successful. But inside the work there is a silence where there used to be resonance, and that silence is not absence. It is the field beginning to withdraw energy from a path that has reached its ceiling. The rerouting is beginning. The first phase has arrived. But because the external markers of success are still present, the person cannot see the withdrawal for what it is. They assume something is wrong with them. They increase their commitment to the career in order to restore the feeling they have lost. And the feeling does not return because the feeling was never arbitrary. It was information. Now, consider a different kind of example. A person who has spent years pursuing a creative practice that they believe is their purpose. Writing, painting, music, filmmaking. The specific form matters less than the pattern. For years, the work came. For years, they moved through the creative territory with the feeling of someone who has found their true home inside a particular craft. And then the work stops coming. Not because they have stopped caring, not because they have been defeated. The creative channel goes quiet in a way that feels different from ordinary blocks or difficult seasons. The ideas do not arrive. The work that does emerge feels flat against the standard of what they were once producing. The whole practice, which once felt like a living transmission, begins to feel like performance. This is one of the most frightening forms of rerouting because the creative identity is so deeply woven into the person's sense of self. They are not just losing a project, they are losing the primary language through which they understood who they were. But what the field is doing in this silence is not removing the creative gift. It is separating the person from the form the gift was taking in order to redirect it toward a new form, a new subject, a new depth, a new audience, a new expression that the old creative identity was not yet large enough to hold. The silence is not the end of the gift. It is the space between the old form and the new one. Consider the person who leaves a long relationship, or the relationship leaves them. The distinction matters emotionally, but not structurally, because in both cases the effect is the same. The coordinates that were organized around that relationship suddenly vanish. The daily rhythm, the shared language, the future that was being planned, the identity of being a partner to that particular person, all of it dissolves. What fills the space left by a significant relationship ending is not immediately another relationship. What fills it first is the field's rerouting process. The person is being returned to a position of self-navigation after a long period in which they were, at least partly, navigating in conjunction with another. But most people cannot hold this space. The relational identity was so total that its absence feels like an emergency. And so they fill the space quickly with new connections that the field did not open, or with elaborate retrospective analysis of what went wrong, or with a grief so absolute that it becomes a wall between them and the new coordinates that the rerouting is trying to reveal. The relationship did not end as punishment. It ended because both people had reached the limit of what that particular form of connection could offer them. The field was freeing them both for something the closed circle of that relationship could not have generated. Consider the person who relocates. They move to a new city, a new country, a new landscape. And instead of the expansion they expected, they experience a profound and unexpected dislocation. Nothing feels like home. The connections they assumed they would make take longer to form than anticipated. The sense of identity that was anchored in the familiar geography of their former life floats without mooring. They believe they have made a mistake. They begin to look back at the place they left with the nostalgia they would not have felt had they stayed, because distance creates the illusion of a perfection that was never accurate. The confusion is real, but the confusion is the suspension phase of a rerouting that the relocation itself initiated. The new city is not wrong. The timing of the connections forming is not wrong. The dislocation is the field reorganizing the person's identity around a larger space than the one they previously occupied. The person who understands rerouting gives the new geography time to speak. They do not demand immediate confirmation that the move was right. They allow the new landscape to begin transmitting before they decide whether they can receive what it is sending. Consider the spiritual seeker who has been devoted to a particular practice, tradition, or community for a significant period of time. The practice gave them a sense of orientation, belonging, and clarity. And then something shifts. The teachings that once illuminated begin to feel like boundaries rather than maps. The community that once felt like home begins to feel like a container that has become too small. The spiritual language they have been using begins to feel insufficient for what they are actually experiencing. They believe they are losing their faith. They interpret the departure of the old spiritual certainty as spiritual failure. Some of them return to the old practice with redoubled effort, trying to force the illumination that once arrived naturally. Some of them abandon the practice entirely and experience the backlash of having identified so completely with a tradition that its exit also removes their sense of spiritual validity. But what is actually happening is a rerouting of the spiritual identity toward a depth and a complexity that the former practice, however valuable, was not designed to reach. The field is not removing the seeking. It is redirecting it toward a more accurate and more expansive understanding. This is one of the most sacred forms of rerouting, and it is one of the most terrifying, because the one thing a spiritual seeker needs during a rerouting is precisely the thing that rerouting temporarily removes: certainty. Consider the person who has paused, not because they made a strategic decision to pause, but because life simply stopped producing momentum in any direction. The applications have stalled, the plans have not developed. The doors that were supposed to open did not open, and the person is standing in a life that feels temporarily suspended, waiting for something they cannot name to shift. This pause is often interpreted as the universe ignoring them. They pray, they practice, they set intentions, they do the work, and nothing moves. The stillness is read as absence, but the stillness is the suspension phase in its clearest form. The field has placed a deliberate pause in the architecture of this person's life because the new coordinates cannot be received while the old momentum is still running. The pause is the calibration. The life is not stalled. The life is being rewritten at a level the conscious mind cannot access. Every one of these examples shares a single hidden structure. Energy is withdrawn from the old path. The person experiences this as loss, failure, confusion, or punishment. The new path begins to emerge quietly through signals that do not resemble the old form of confirmation. And the person who learns to read the new signals is the person who moves through the rerouting into the territory that was waiting for them on the other side. This structure is not a metaphor, it is a mechanism. And once you know the mechanism, you can see it in every chapter of your own life where the map expired before you understood why. The first sign that rerouting has begun is usually the most subtle and therefore the most commonly missed. It is not a dramatic event. It is a quality of flatness that settles over something that was once vivid. A goal that once made the body lean forward with anticipation now sits in the mind like a piece of furniture you have moved past so many times it has become invisible. The goal is still there. The logic of pursuing it is still intact. But the energy that once made the pursuit feel natural has quietly departed. This flatness is not laziness. It is not fear. It is not distraction or lack of discipline. It has a specific texture that distinguishes it from all of those things. Laziness yields to inspiration and effort. Fear yields to courage and action. Distraction yields to focused attention. But the flatness of rerouting does not yield to any of these. You can apply all of your effort, all of your conviction, all of your discipline, and the flatness remains. This is because the flatness is not coming from within the self. It is coming from the field, and it is a withdrawal of resonance rather than a withdrawal of willpower. The second sign is what might be called the unexpected conversation. Someone enters your life, or re-enters it, and says something that lands differently than anything in your current context has been landing. The conversation was not scheduled. It did not arrive through any of the channels you have been cultivating. It arrived from an oblique angle, through a coincidence of timing or location, and the content of it touches something in you that your official goals and plans had not been touching. You might dismiss it. Most people do. Because the unexpected conversation does not look like confirmation. It looks like a tangent. It looks like an interesting aside that has nothing to do with your actual trajectory. But the field transmits through exactly this kind of lateral approach. It places information in your path through channels you were not monitoring, because the channels you were monitoring had already been delivering the old frequency. The third sign is the repetition of new symbols, not the symbols you have always associated with your path. New ones, images, words, themes, and configurations that appear with a frequency that exceeds statistical randomness, but that do not yet fit neatly into your existing map. You see a particular word 3 times in 3 different contexts in a single week. A theme appears in your reading, your conversations, and a dream, without apparent coordination between the sources. A door appears as a recurring symbol in your inner life, but the door is not one you recognize. These are not coincidences in the dismissive sense of the word. They are the field's emerging transmission. They are the new map beginning to write itself in the language of synchronicity, which is always the first language the field uses when it is introducing new coordinates. You do not need to force an interpretation immediately. You need to record them. You need to let the pattern accumulate until its meaning becomes legible. The fourth sign is the loss of energy around former ambitions. Not just the flatness of a single goal, but the broader sense that an entire architecture of ambition has lost its animating force. You used to be someone who wanted specific things. You had a clear picture of the life you were building. And now, when you look at that picture, it feels like a photograph of someone you used to be rather than a blueprint for who you are becoming. This is disorienting in a way that is difficult to articulate without a language for rerouting, because the loss of the old ambition is not depression. You are not without desire. You simply do not yet know what the new desire is called, or what shape it takes, or in which direction it points. The old architecture is empty, and the new one has not yet arrived. You are standing in the cleared space between two versions of your life, and the cleared space has no name in the vocabulary you were given. The fifth sign is the sudden irrelevance of former certainties. Things you knew, positions you held, beliefs you organized your life around, begin to feel uncertain without any external event having challenged them. You did not read a new argument. You did not experience a crisis that forced a revision. Something simply shifted from the inside at a level you cannot fully account for. And the thing you were certain of yesterday feels today like a question rather than an answer. The sixth sign is the appearance of new teachers, guides, and sources of information. They arrive without being sought. A book falls open to a page that speaks to your exact condition. A stranger mentions something in passing that contains the precise insight you needed. A channel, a community, a discipline enters your awareness from a direction you were not looking in. These arrivals are the field's emergent transmission becoming more legible. They are the new coordinates beginning to take form as recognizable content. The seventh sign is the collapse of forced momentum. You've been working towards something with great effort, and suddenly the effort itself becomes exhausting in a way that feels different from ordinary fatigue. It is not that you are tired. It is that the effort is producing a specific feeling. The feeling of pushing against a surface that is not yielding because it is sealed, not because it requires more force. You push, and the wall does not move. And the wall does not feel angry or resistant. It simply feels final. The eighth sign is the arrival of unexpected peace in unexpected places. At the very moment when your official path is producing friction and exhaustion, something at the edge of your life, something unofficial, something you do not yet take seriously as a real direction, begins to produce a quiet and unreasonable sense of rightness. You do not know why this peripheral thing feels alive when the central thing feels dead. You have not yet given yourself permission to follow it, but it is alive, and its aliveness is a signal. The ninth sign is what might be called the disappearance of your audience. The people, contexts, and communities that have been witnessing your journey begin to feel misaligned, not hostile, not wrong, simply no longer quite the right container for who you are becoming. Conversations that once felt nourishing begin to feel slightly off-register, not because those people have changed, but because you have, at a level that has not yet become visible in behavior. The 10th sign is the reappearance of a former self. During rerouting, something from earlier in your life frequently resurfaces. A subject you loved as a child. A capacity you set aside when you became practical. A way of being in the world that your current identity had declared irrelevant. The field is showing you something. The thing being resurfaced is not a regression. It is a route. The new path often passes through something old that was never fully developed, and the rerouting is partly a return before it is an advance. These signs do not all appear simultaneously. They appear across time, overlapping and accumulating, and their accumulation is itself the pattern. A single sign can be dismissed. 2 or 3 signs can be called coincidence. But when 5, 6, 7 of these signals appear in the same season, you are not experiencing a run of bad luck or an inexplicable plateau. You are being rerouted. If you have recognized yourself in this pattern, if these signs are describing your current season or a season you have recently emerged from, write the word rerouted in the comments of this codex, not as a performance, but as an act of recognition. Because naming what you are experiencing is the first step toward receiving what the experience is trying to give you. The feeling of being lost, when it is actually the feeling of being rerouted, reveals something that is not comfortable to acknowledge. It reveals that you have been holding a very specific relationship with certainty. A relationship that was, in many ways, more about emotional safety than about actual navigation. The need to know exactly where you are going, and the distress that arrives when that knowledge is removed, is not simply a preference for organization. It is a signal about the architecture of your inner life. This is worth staying with, because the revelation here is not a judgment, it is a diagnostic. And diagnostics that are received without defense are the ones that produce transformation. The first thing that the feeling of being lost reveals is an over-identification with the plan. At some point, the map became the journey. The route became the identity. The goals you were working towards stopped being targets and started being definitions of your value, your worthiness, your rightness as a person moving through the world. When the map expired, it was not just a set of directions that disappeared. It was a version of yourself that was entirely organized around knowing what came next. This over-identification with the plan is extraordinarily common and almost universally unexamined. Most people do not realize how much of their sense of self is contingent on forward motion in a known direction. They discover it only when the direction disappears. And then, the dissolution of the map produces a dissolution of self that feels catastrophic rather than transitional. The second revelation is the fear of emptiness. The suspension phase of rerouting confronts you directly with a particular variety of inner space, the space of not yet knowing. And the depth of your discomfort in that space is a very precise measure of your relationship with emptiness. If you have been using constant forward motion to avoid a deeper encounter with yourself, the suspension phase removes that avoidance. It leaves you in the quiet with no destination to focus on, and what arises in that quiet is everything you were moving fast enough to avoid feeling. This is not the field being cruel. This is the field being precise. The new map cannot be received by a consciousness that has never learned to be still. The new coordinates are written in a frequency that constant motion obscures. The field removes the motion so that the frequency can be heard. But what the person experiences in that removal is the terror of emptiness rather than the gift of stillness. And the terror reveals what they have been using the motion to avoid. The third revelation is an attachment to external confirmation. The disorientation of rerouting is significantly amplified by the experience of receiving no external confirmation of rightness. When the old map was working, there were markers: progress, results, recognition, response. These external markers were functioning as a validation system. The person was using them to know they were on the right path. When the rerouting begins, these markers disappear or become ambiguous, and the intensity of the disorientation that follows is proportional to the degree to which the person was outsourcing their sense of navigation to external confirmation. The person who has a strong inner compass, who can feel alignment from the inside without requiring external markers to confirm it, navigates a rerouting season with significantly less suffering than the person whose navigation depends entirely on outer feedback. This is the revelation embedded in your disorientation. To whatever degree you are suffering in the suspension, that suffering is the exact size of your dependence on external confirmation. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be seen clearly, because the new path that is emerging will require a different navigation system than the old one. And part of what the rerouting season is building in you is the capacity to navigate by inner signal rather than outer marker. The fourth revelation is the presence of an unexamined assumption about time. Most people who experience rerouting carry an invisible belief that their life has a schedule and that they are either on time or behind. This belief creates a specific kind of suffering that has nothing to do with the actual rerouting and everything to do with the assumption beneath it. The person is not just experiencing confusion about direction. They are experiencing the additional weight of believing they are falling behind a timeline that was never real. The field does not operate on your timeline. This is not a comfortable statement, but it is an accurate one. The timing of rerouting, the duration of the suspension phase, the pace of the emergence, none of these respond to the timeline you have constructed in your mind. And the gap between the timeline you expected and the one the field is actually operating on produces a suffering that is entirely self-generated. The rerouting itself is not painful. The resistance to the rerouting's pace is what produces the pain. The fifth revelation is about identity rigidity. The degree to which you are disturbed by the dissolution of your former map is also the degree to which your identity was rigid around a particular self-concept. A fluid identity, one that understands itself as a living system rather than a fixed object, can tolerate the dissolution of a particular form without experiencing it as the dissolution of the self. A rigid identity cannot. Rerouting seasons are, in part, designed to loosen the rigidity. They are designed to introduce you to a version of yourself that is not dependent on a particular role, plan, relationship, or location for its coherence. This is one of the most important developments a consciousness can undergo, and it almost never happens voluntarily. It almost always happens through the disorientation of a rerouting season that removes the structures the rigid identity was organized around. What is being revealed to you in your disorientation is not your weakness. It is the architecture of your former self. And what is being built in the space that disorientation creates is an identity that does not require the certainty of a fixed map to remain whole. This is the identity that can receive a hidden map, because it is no longer insisting that the map look like the one it has always known. Not every confusion is rerouting. This is one of the most important distinctions in this codex, and it must be stated clearly, because the language of rerouting can be misused. It can become a sophisticated form of avoidance. It can become the spiritual vocabulary of someone who is not in a genuine transition, but who has found a way to narrate their resistance as wisdom. The archive does not honor this misuse. The archive demands discernment. The first distortion to understand is the confusion between rerouting and self-sabotage. Rerouting arrives unbidden. The withdrawal of energy from the old path is not something you choose or engineer. It arrives from the field, and it has a quality that is distinct from the withdrawal of energy that comes from fear. When rerouting occurs, the path loses energy even when you are genuinely engaged, genuinely courageous, and genuinely aligned with your work. The path simply goes quiet at a structural level. Self-sabotage looks different. In self-sabotage, the energy disappears precisely when success becomes possible. The path does not lose energy uniformly. It loses energy at the threshold of exposure, commitment, or visibility. The creative work stalls not in the middle of a stable creative season, but at the exact moment when it would need to be shared. The career stagnates not because the work has reached its ceiling, but because moving further would require a risk that the subconscious has been trained to avoid. The diagnostic question for this distortion is, does the energy disappear everywhere and uniformly, or does it disappear specifically when advancement requires vulnerability? If the answer is the latter, the field is not rerouting you. The subconscious is retreating from you, and the work that is needed is not patient waiting, but confrontation with the belief that made advancement feel dangerous. The second distortion is the confusion between rerouting and chronic indecision. Rerouting is a phase. It has a quality of movement even within its stillness. There is a sense, however faint, of something shifting toward a new orientation. Chronic indecision is not a phase, it is a pattern. It repeats across different areas of life, in different seasons, in different contexts. It produces the same stalled quality regardless of the circumstances. If your life has been organized around indecision for years, across multiple domains and multiple attempts at direction, this is not evidence of prolonged rerouting. This is evidence of a particular relationship with commitment that predates any specific rerouting season. The field cannot reroute a life that has never chosen a direction because there is no former trajectory to redirect. There is only the habit of suspension, which is not the field suspension, but the self's. The third distortion is the confusion between rerouting and escapism. Rerouting leads somewhere. Even in the suspension phase, there is an orientation toward new coordinates that can be felt as a quiet pull, a sense of something approaching. Escapism leads away from something. The direction of the movement is the tell. Is the desire to leave the current path coming from an attraction toward new territory? Or is it coming from a repulsion toward the discomfort of what the current path requires? A person experiencing genuine rerouting is not primarily fleeing something. They are being drawn forward, even when they cannot name what they are being drawn toward. A person in escapism is primarily fleeing. The new territory they imagine is primarily defined by its difference from the territory they want to leave. They have not received new coordinates. They have simply reached the limit of what they are willing to endure on the current path. This distinction is subtle but critical. The person in genuine rerouting needs to learn to wait and read the new signal. The person in escapism needs to examine what they are fleeing and whether the flight would produce anything other than a new version of the same territory they left. The fourth distortion is the confusion between rerouting and poor preparation. Sometimes a path does not produce results, not because the field is withdrawing energy from it, but because the person on it has not yet built the skills, relationships, knowledge, or discipline that the path requires. The door that is not opening is not always closed by the field. Sometimes it is closed by the fact that the person knocking on it has not yet become who the door is waiting for. This is not a comfortable distinction to make, because it requires honest self-assessment rather than spiritual interpretation. It requires asking, have I prepared as thoroughly as I am capable of preparing, or have I been asking the field to compensate for gaps that are mine to fill? The field does not bypass preparation, it works through it. And the conviction that a door should open regardless of whether you are ready for what is on the other side is not faith. It is avoidance dressed in spiritual language. The fifth distortion is the confusion between rerouting and the normal difficulty of a correct path. Not every resistance is a signal to reroute. Some paths are difficult because they are genuinely difficult, not because they are wrong. Some closed doors are closed by circumstance rather than by the field's correction. Some delays are structural rather than symbolic. The person who interprets every obstacle as a rerouting signal will never build anything requiring sustained effort through resistance, because they will always interpret the resistance as a sign that they should be somewhere else. The discernment here is not simple, but it is available. A correct path in a difficult season still produces pockets of aliveness, moments of resonance, small confirmations that arrive through the effort and not despite it. A path that the field has withdrawn energy from produces no such pockets. It is uniformly quiet, uniformly flat, uniformly without the spark of recognition that tells you the work is yours to do even when it is hard. Aliveness through difficulty is confirmation. Flatness through effort is information. These are different signals, and learning to distinguish them is one of the most important capacities a consciousness navigating a long life can develop. The Hidden Map Protocol is a sequence of practices for navigating a rerouting season with precision. It is not a passive framework. It is not a prescription for surrender. It is a structured method for reading the field accurately when familiar navigation has failed and new coordinates have not yet fully declared themselves. The protocol has 6 movements. Each movement has a specific function, and they are designed to be followed in sequence, not because the sequence is arbitrary, but because each movement creates the conditions for the next one to be effective. The first movement of the protocol is called Stop Forcing the Old Coordinates. This movement is the hardest because it requires you to do the thing that feels most counterintuitive at the beginning of a rerouting season. It requires you to stop trying to revive a path that has lost its energy. This does not mean abandoning all activity. It means stopping the specific activity of forcing outcomes on a path that the field has already begun to close. It means recognizing that the redoubled effort you are applying to a dead signal is not faith, it is fear. To enact this movement, identify the specific areas of your life where you have been applying maximum effort for diminishing or non-existent return. Not where the work is hard because it is growing, where the work is hard because the energy that once lived in it has gone. Make a list if that helps. These are the expired coordinates. Acknowledge that they were valid once, that they served a real purpose in a former chapter, and that their expiration does not mean the chapter was a mistake. Then stop pulling on them, not dramatically, not with a declaration of abandonment. Simply stop allocating your primary energy to paths that the field has gone quiet on. The second movement of the protocol is called Record the Repeating Signals. The field has been speaking. It has been transmitting new coordinates through the channels described earlier in this codex. The unexpected conversations, the repeating symbols, the themes that keep appearing across unrelated contexts, the peripheral aliveness that you have been dismissing as coincidental or irrelevant. Begin keeping a record, not an analysis. A record. Write down every repeated theme, every unexpected arrival, every symbol that appears more than once without explanation. Do not try to interpret individual entries immediately. Allow the record to accumulate. The pattern will not be readable from a single entry. It will become readable when the entries form a shape, and the shape is often only visible in retrospect, across a body of recorded observations rather than from within a single moment. The archive calls this the signal log. It is one of the simplest and most powerful tools available during a rerouting season because it transforms diffuse, easily dismissed intuitions into a documented pattern that the rational mind can also recognize. The field speaks in repetition. Your signal log is the instrument you use to make that repetition visible. The third movement of the protocol is called Identify What Has Gone Dead. This is the complement of recording the living signals. Just as the field transmits new coordinates through aliveness, it communicates the expiration of old coordinates through the specific quality of deadness that has been described throughout this codex. Go through the major areas of your life, your work, your creative practice, your relationships, your physical environment, your social commitments, your stated goals. For each area, ask a single question. Not does this make logical sense to continue, but does this still carry life? Can you feel the field's current in it, or has it gone still in the specific way that indicates withdrawal rather than difficulty? Be honest. This is a diagnostic, not a performance. The goal is not to justify what you have already decided. The goal is to see clearly. The areas that have gone dead are the old coordinates. The areas that still carry life, even quietly, even in unexpected places, are the emerging map. The fourth movement of the protocol is called Test Small New Movements. Once you have identified the dead coordinates and begun recording the living signals, the protocol asks you to begin testing the new territory, not committing to it, not reorganizing your entire life around it, testing it. Small, reversible, low-commitment movements in the direction of what the field's transmission seems to be indicating. The principle here is that new coordinates cannot be fully read from a position of stillness. They need to be activated by gentle contact. A single conversation pursued because an unexpected signal pointed to it. A single practice engaged with because the signal log has shown its theme appearing repeatedly. A single door approached because the peripheral aliveness has been concentrating around it. These small movements do two things simultaneously. They allow you to test whether the new signal is genuine by seeing whether contact with it produces more aliveness or more flatness. And they show the field that you are receptive, that you have stopped demanding that the new coordinates arrive in the form of the old ones, and have become willing to follow a different kind of guidance. The fifth movement of the protocol is called Request Confirmation. This is not a passive movement, it is an active and specific one. Once you have made a small movement in a new direction, you are permitted to request confirmation from the field that the direction is accurate, but the request must be made precisely. Do not request confirmation in the form of a grand sign. Do not ask for an unmistakable signal that eliminates all uncertainty. Ask instead for a specific, observable, small confirmation. Ask for the signal to appear one more time if the direction is right. Ask for the next conversation on this theme to arrive within a defined period. Ask for the door you have approached to open with noticeably less friction than the doors you have been forcing on the expired path. Then, pay attention to what happens. The field responds to specific requests differently than it responds to vague ones. Specificity is a form of alignment. It tells the field that you are genuinely attempting to read the new transmission rather than simply hoping for rescue. And when a specific confirmation arrives, it is far more reliable than a general one, because you asked a precise question and the field gave a precise answer. The sixth movement of the protocol is called follow low-friction openings. This is the principle that governs movement once the new coordinates have begun to declare themselves. In a rerouting season, the correct direction is consistently marked by a specific quality. Things that should be difficult are easier than expected. Doors open without the force that was required on the old path. The right people arrive without the elaborate pursuit that the old network required. The work that belongs to the new chapter produces results with an efficiency that the work on the old path did not, regardless of how much effort the old work received. This is not a promise that the new path will be effortless. The new path will have its own challenges, but it will not have the specific quality of working against a sealed surface. It will have the quality of moving through territory that, while sometimes difficult, is clearly permeable. When you find yourself in a place where forward movement produces traction rather than resistance, you are in the field's open channel. Stay in it. Follow it. This is the hidden map declaring itself in real time. The protocol does not guarantee a timeline. It does not promise that the rerouting will be complete in a particular number of weeks or months. What it guarantees is this: a person following the hidden map protocol will not miss the field's transmission because they were too busy forcing the old signal. They will not spend a rerouting season in noise when they could have been in reception. They will arrive at the new coordinates informed, attentive, and prepared to move on a path that their former self could not have followed because their former self was not yet equipped to find it. The protocol is not magic. It is literacy. It is the difference between a person who encounters the field's transmission and calls it coincidence, and a person who encounters the same transmission and says, "I see you. I am reading you. I am following." The first mistake is the most seductive, and it is this: returning to the expired map the moment the suspension becomes uncomfortable. This is not a conscious decision. No one wakes up and thinks, "I will deliberately ignore the rerouting and return to a path that the field has already closed." What happens is more subtle. The discomfort of the suspension reaches a level that the nervous system cannot hold any longer, and the person reaches for the nearest available structure, which is usually the old one, because the old one is known, even if it is expired. The return to the expired map feels like taking action. It feels like courage. It feels like deciding not to be passive in the face of confusion. But it is not courage. It is relief-seeking, and the difference between those two things matters enormously in a rerouting season, because relief-seeking will always reach for the nearest available structure regardless of whether that structure is alive, while courage will hold the discomfort of the suspension until the new structure becomes legible. Watch for this pattern with great attention. Watch for the moments when the suspension becomes unbearable, and notice what you reach for. If what you reach for is the old map, the old identity, the old path, the old relationship dynamic, the old creative approach, you are not navigating the rerouting. You are interrupting it. The second mistake is making dramatic moves too quickly. The suspension phase of rerouting produces an intense pressure to resolve the uncertainty by making a large, definitive choice. This pressure is understandable. It is the nervous system's attempt to restore a sense of direction. But large, hasty commitments made during the suspension phase are almost always premature, because the new coordinates have not yet fully declared themselves. The person who quits their career the moment it begins to feel dead, before any new direction has declared itself, is not following the field. They are escaping discomfort. The person who ends a relationship at the first sign of rerouting, without examining whether the rerouting is about the relationship or about something else entirely, is not responding to guidance. They are manufacturing resolution in the absence of information. The protocol teaches small movements precisely because small movements can be corrected. Large, dramatic moves made during the suspension phase often produce consequences that take years to navigate, and they frequently close the very doors the rerouting was trying to open. The third mistake is consulting everyone for direction. During a rerouting season, the desire for external guidance becomes acute. The person seeks opinions, advice, and validation from every available source. This is understandable, but it is also one of the most reliable ways to corrupt the signal that the field is trying to deliver. The field speaks to you. It speaks through your inner life, through your signal log, through the synchronicities that appear in your specific experience. None of the people you consult have access to the frequency that the field is using to communicate with you. They have their own maps, their own histories, their own fears and preferences, and unexamined assumptions. And because they want to help, they will offer you their coordinates, and their coordinates are not yours. This does not mean isolating yourself from all guidance. It means being very selective about what advice you actually integrate. The guidance that belongs in your rerouting season is the guidance that confirms what you are already beginning to sense, not the guidance that provides a direction you had not yet felt. The field sends confirmations. It does not send instructions through other people who do not know the frequency you are navigating. The fourth mistake is confusing discomfort with misalignment. Not every form of difficulty on the new path is a sign that the new path is wrong. The new map will have its own demands. It will require the development of capacities you do not currently possess. It will place you in situations where you are genuinely inexperienced and uncomfortable. This discomfort is growth, not misalignment. The person who interprets every moment of difficulty on the new path as evidence that they are on the wrong path will never stay on any path long enough to see what it can produce. They will move from one rerouting to the next, always leaving just before the discomfort of growth could have transformed into the satisfaction of development. The diagnostic is the same one offered earlier in this codex. Is the discomfort accompanied by aliveness, or is it accompanied by flatness? Difficult and alive is confirmation. Difficult and flat is information. Growth is difficult, but it has a pulse. The expired path is quiet in a way that effort cannot warm. The fifth mistake is performing patience as a substitute for engagement. The language of rerouting, of waiting, of suspension can become a sophisticated form of passivity. The person who has learned this language sometimes uses it to justify a complete absence of movement, calling their inaction trust and their avoidance surrender. The hidden map protocol does not teach passivity. It teaches calibrated movement. The suspension phase requires stillness in the area of the expired path. It does not require stillness everywhere. The signal log requires active recording. The small new movements require genuine action. The request for confirmation requires deliberate engagement with the field. Rerouting is not something that happens to you while you wait. It is something you participate in through a different quality of attention and a different quality of movement than the one you were using before. The hidden map protocol applies at a depth that extends far beyond career confusion or creative blocks. It applies to the most fundamental structures of a life: who you believe yourself to be, what you believe you are here to do, and what reality owes you in return for your effort. These are the deeper coordinates, and when they expire, the rerouting that follows is not a seasonal adjustment, it is a civilizational shift in the inner landscape. The first advanced application is identity rerouting. There are seasons in a life when it is not the plan that expires, but the self-concept organized around the plan. The person who defined themselves as the ambitious one, the creative one, the caretaker, the provider, the seeker, discovers that the identity has reached its limit. Not because the identity was wrong, but because it was a phase, a version of the self that served its purpose and has now been completed. Identity rerouting is the deepest and most terrifying form of the process described in this codex. It removes not just the direction, but the definition, and the new identity that the field is writing cannot be forced into existence. It can only be received through the same protocol described here, applied at the level of selfhood rather than the level of strategy. Stop forcing the old self-definition. Record what is emerging. Identify what has gone dead in the old identity. Test small new ways of being. Follow what produces aliveness. The second advanced application is purpose rerouting. Purpose, in the living sense, is not a fixed destination. It is a moving channel through which a consciousness expresses its deepest capacities in relation to what the world currently needs. This channel moves. What was a person's clearest channel of purpose at 30 may not be their clearest channel at 40 or 50. The rerouting of purpose is not a betrayal of former devotion. It is the field directing a more mature expression of the same underlying gift. The person who receives a purpose rerouting and interprets it as the loss of their purpose will spend years trying to revive a form of expression that the field has redirected. The person who understands purpose rerouting will follow the new channel with the same devotion they brought to the old one, trusting that the field has not removed their gift, but redirected the form it is meant to take. The third advanced application is relational rerouting. Relationships, like all living systems, have a field of resonance that either lives or expires over time. When a relationship's field goes quiet, it does not always mean the relationship must end, but it does mean that the form the relationship has been taking has reached the limit of what it can produce. The relationship may need a rerouting as profound as the one a life undertakes, a dissolution of the old dynamic and the emergence of a new one, or it may need an ending that allows both people to follow their individual rerouting without the constraint of a connection that has completed its purpose. The discernment here is one of the most delicate this codex addresses. It requires honesty about whether the relationship's field has genuinely gone quiet, or whether the discomfort in the relationship is the friction of two people growing, which is alive, rather than the flatness of two people who have finished growing together. The diagnostic is the same. Friction with aliveness is growth. Flatness with effort is completion. The fourth advanced application is financial rerouting. Money, in the metaphysical framework of this archive, is not merely a practical resource, it is a feedback system. The way money moves in a person's life, where it flows freely, where it dries up, where it arrives unexpectedly, and where it consistently fails to accumulate despite effort, is a pattern of information. When the financial field undergoes rerouting, it often signals a needed shift in how value is being expressed and received. A person whose income has stagnated despite increasing effort is receiving a financial rerouting signal. The question the protocol asks is not how to work harder on the same income-generating path. It asks, where is the aliveness in my value exchange? Where does what I offer meet what the world actually needs? And where am I trying to extract value from an expired channel? The new financial coordinates are written in the same language as all other rerouting signals, and they are found through the same process of recording, identifying, testing, and following. The fifth advanced application is spiritual timing. There are moments in a life when the spiritual practice, the community, the tradition, or the understanding that has been serving as the primary framework for meaning reaches the end of its current capacity. This is the spiritual rerouting described earlier in this codex, but applied at the level of the most advanced practitioner. The person who has been devoted to a path for years and finds it going quiet is not being punished for their devotion. They are being promoted by it. Spiritual rerouting asks the practitioner to hold the expiration of a former framework without collapsing into either desperate return or nihilistic abandonment. It asks them to enter the silence of a completed chapter and wait in it until the next framework begins to speak. This is perhaps the most sophisticated application of the hidden map protocol, because it is being applied to the very system the person uses to interpret all other systems. The framework for navigating rerouting is itself being rerouted, and the only response adequate to this depth of dissolution is the one that has been described throughout this entire codex: stillness, attention, honest recording, small movements, and the willingness to follow a map that does not look like the one you have always known. Return to the sailor. He is no longer before dawn. The light has been building for some time, quietly and without announcement, the way all genuine light builds, not as a sudden proclamation, but as a slow revelation that the dark always overestimated its own permanence. The sailor looks at the back of the map. The line he had never noticed was not drawn in a different hand than the rest of the map. It was drawn by the same cartographer, at the same time, with the same precision. It was always part of the original map. He simply had never turned the page over, because for the entire former portion of the voyage, the front of the map had been sufficient. It had contained everything he needed for the journey he was on. But he was never meant to stay on that journey forever. And the storm that removed the visible shoreline, the storm that spun the compass and dissolved the stars, did not take anything from him that the new leg of the voyage required. It took only what the new leg could not use. It took the coordinates of a chapter that was complete. This is what you have been inside: a completed chapter. And the confusion that brought you to this codex was not a sign of failure. It was the specific sensation of a person who has been reading the front of a map faithfully and intelligently, discovering that the territory has changed enough to make the front insufficient. The back of the map was always there. The hidden route was always drawn. You simply had not yet been through the storm that required you to turn it over. What you carry now is something that was not available to you before this season. You carry illiteracy. You can read the withdrawal of energy from an expired path as information rather than punishment. You can recognize the suspension for what it is, the field's silence before a new frequency. You can see the emerging signals in the peripheral aliveness, the unexpected conversations, the repeating symbols, the low-friction openings that appear not on the old road, but beside it. You are not lost. You were never lost. You were being rerouted toward a chapter that your former coordinates could not have reached, by a field that has been speaking to you in a language you are now equipped to understand. If this codex found you at the right moment, if the sailor on the water felt like something more than a story, keep this archive close. Return to it when the signs become difficult to read and the compass begins to spin again. The third library holds more than one codex, and each one was placed here for the same reason this one was. Because the map you were given was never the only map, and the route written on the back was always yours to follow. The fog is thinning. The light is building. You know where to look now.